Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. Today, I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, eagerly looking forward to talking with author Paige Lee from Eagle, Idaho, about her riveting book titled Choose to Believe, a story of miracles, healing, and the afterlife. In addition to being an author, Paige is a healer, an intuitive, a teacher, and a speaker. Paige's grief journey began when her only living birth child, Bryan Frost, was brutally murdered at the age of 23. Starting with a phone call in the wee hours on September 18, 2008, Paige entered the worst nightmare any parent can imagine. Paige was completely consumed by her grief, but then Bryan reached out to her from the afterlife. I have so many questions for Paige about her amazing journey through devastating grief to healing. Hi, Paige, a warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Hi, Irene. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored just to have you here also. And this is gonna be, I know, an amazing interview. And our personal stories, my story, losing my husband, and your story with your son. We have so many remarkable similarities in our stories. They almost like validate each other. It's really fascinating to me. So I'm going to begin with this question. Please tell us about Bryan's tragic death and his burial, leaving you afraid of living the rest of your life without your son.
Well, that's, we always have to start there, right? I always tell people in my book, the first two chapters are the sadness, and the rest of the book is all about the healing and finding joy. But we have to start with the death. And so thank you for asking that. So Bryan was my only living child. I had 3 babies who died pre-birth before Bryan. I do have 2 beautiful, lovely stepchildren, and they have spouses and families. But Bryan was my only living birth child. And so we were very close. He was my everything. And like I say in the book, if I wasn't visiting him, I was planning the next visit, right? He had left home in 2004 after graduating high school. He'd gone to West Point Military Academy. He was quite brilliant and, did not find his sole purpose there at the academy. So after a year and a half, he left and he transferred in a roundabout way to University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And he finished his degree in economics and then decided that he had discovered a passion for filmmaking, being in Los Angeles, and had met a lot of people from internationally around the world who also had that passion. And so a big group of friends, and they were all in the film school together. So he had renewed after graduating with 1 degree, he had renewed to stay at USC at the film school. And when he was 1 semester away from completing that 2nd degree, he was walking home one night with 2 other boys from a local bar. They had just moved into a new apartment, so they didn't quite know, the way. It was just off campus, and they made a wrong turn. And so that wrong turn took them by an apartment building, and the boys were not drunk, staggering, falling down, but they had had a couple of beers. And so I always have to say that because, Bryan definitely loved to party, right? He was a party kid, but he was also brilliant and smart and friendly and compassionate and kind. In fact, the summer before he died, he'd been in Pakistan with one of his friends from film school, and he had spent, a considerable amount of time with all the kids that were in the soccer fields and talking to them about education and how important it is to pursue an education, because Bryan was all about that. Anyhow, we were walking home and they walked by an apartment building and there was a gate standing open, and Bryan just, walking by, reached out and slammed the gate shut. And that simple act triggered anger and rage in somebody who came running out and started a fight. And that fight ended in a fatal stab wound. And Bryan died in this, well, I guess actually he died in the ambulance, but they finally got the guy to leave them alone. And I don't, want to waste your time with the whole story, but they were walking across the street to get back on track to heading home. And all of a sudden, Bryan stopped and he grabbed his chest and he said, "Oh my gosh, I think I've been stabbed." And he collapsed on the spot and died in the ambulance on the way back. So we, Idaho time. So, one of the things that used to nag me so much, Irene, was how did I not know? How did I sleep through that? How did I not know? But then I remembered I did know, because the night before, Bryan and I had talked on the phone, and he had told me he was going to go out and it was getting late. And I said, "Don't go, please don't go. You don't need to go. It's too late to go." Right. I was really trying to convince him to stay home. I had a premonition. I didn't even know it. But anyhow, we were so close. And so I was completely devastated. We had to go to LA. We had to meet with the school, which was horrible, to be honest with you. I mean, all kind souls that meant well, but that was the last thing I wanted to do, the day or the next day. I think it was the day that my son died, was meeting with the people from USC, but they had good intentions. What do you do? So we came home. It was a horrible experience. It was awful. It was devastating. We finally were able to have the funeral because we couldn't get the body back, right away, because it was a murder investigation. And the whole burial was just, there's a really sad story about that I'll just wait and let people read in the book, because I'd rather talk about the healing. That's my passion, my love. But I'll tell you the one good thing about it. His whole slew of friends drove up from LA, this group of kids, this international group of children, and they all came. They're not children. They were like, 20 years old, 22 years old, but they all came up to Idaho 5 times in the first 6 months after he died. 5 times. Can you believe that? So they did much for my healing. All of his high school friends came, and we got through it. We got through it together. We leaned on each other. But those were hard days for sure. Those were hard days.
Wow. So Bryan reached out to you from the afterlife only 3 weeks after he died. That's amazing. And how did that inspire your intensive search to find him and reconnect your mother-son relationship?
I am so lucky, Irene, because for whatever reason, I was chosen to go on this journey, right? And well, I know the reason, but we'll talk about that later. But at the time, I was like, wow, I'm just like, I've got Bryan. I heard him out loud with my ears. I was laying on my bed. It was not nighttime. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't in pajamas. I was laying on the bed, resting with my eyes closed, but not asleep. My husband was in the bathroom. And all of a sudden, I heard out loud with my ears, "Mom!" And just like that, "Mom!" And I jumped up and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Bryan, where are you? Where are you?" And I couldn't see him, and I'm looking and I don't see him and I can't hear him anymore. I just heard the one call. And I said, and I knew intuitively that he still lived somewhere, that I could find him, and that I would never stop looking. And so I immediately jumped up. I went to my bookcase. I'm like, scanning my books. Do I have anything in the afterlife? Because I had no real knowledge or belief in the afterlife prior to his death. Except I did believe in heaven, right? I believed in heaven. I went to church as a kid, but I didn't really understand what any of it meant. I didn't have any personal experience with it. So I went to the bookstore and I bought tons of books on the afterlife, and that's how the journey started. I did. I bought, you wouldn't believe the books and some of them like threw themselves on the floor. I mean, it was like, get this one and this one and this one. And the first book I read was, Lessons from the Light by George Anderson. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. This is real. I can still talk to him. I can have a relationship with him, and I'm going to find out how. Because, as I said, he was my only living child. He was my life's joy. He was my everything. Everything I did was for him or about him. I hate to say it. I mean, that sounds terrible.
Oh no, but I understand. I mean, like
yeah,
in the same place as you. I have a son, and I understand.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, they say there are no coincidences. So something had to get you to start your healing journey, and you were led to a message circle that began it. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so this was probably maybe 3 weeks after. I mean, no more than 3 weeks after I heard him call out to me, and so I had started my journey of finding him. Right, didn't know what any of that meant, but I just knew that I had to find him. And so my husband took me to the grocery store, which I had not been leaving the house very often, but I went that day. And in the produce, I'm in the produce section. I'm kind of looking down, and then I look up, and then there's a woman who I know that her son and Bryan were friends, and I like look away and I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk to her. I don't want to talk to her. And I hear spirit. I didn't understand it to be spirit, but I heard a voice in my head said, go talk to her. And I said, no. I out loud, I say, no, I'm not going to go talk to her. I don't want to talk to anybody. Go talk to her. And I'm like, no. And like, it took me a while to really trust spirit and do what they
Ah,
say the first time. But so on the third time, I'm like, fine, I'll go talk to her. So I'm like, hi, Carol. And she goes, oh, Paige, hi, how are you? How's Bryan?
she
And I
didn't know.
just almost collapsed. I mean, I'm like, you don't know. How do you not know? You know, we're such a small community. It's been on the news nonstop. How do you not know? And so I said, she said, well, I guess, is there anything I can do? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, you don't happen to know a good psychic, do you? And she's like, well, as a matter of fact, I do. And I'm having a spirit circle, a message circle at my home in a couple of weeks. And I have 2 openings. Would you like to come? And of course I said yes. And that opened me up to the whole world of mediumship and psychics and communication with our loved ones on the other side and spirit, and changed my world. All of this changed my world, but one step led to another. And I just said yes. I said yes always. And so I was able to keep putting one foot forward, right? At the same time, I had one foot in my grief lane.
Of
So at the
course.
same, I did a Facebook post recently about this. It's like one foot forward with the spiritual learning and one foot forward with the grieving necessity of crying and screaming and kicking the floor and journaling and sitting out at the gravesite and crying. And, so that was all happening simultaneously with pursuing this spiritual journey. And it was the spiritual journey that fueled, that allowed me to continue grieving and not give up.
And actually, I can so relate because the spiritual journey kind of keeps you from total despair. I
Yes.
mean, if you didn't, it provides a comfort, and and you realize that it's real.
Yes. It took a long time for me to
Right.
realize
Yeah, I
it.
know. I mean, you keep needing me too to this day. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. It's like you're continually convinced, but it is real.
Yeah.
Bryan's death became a catalyst for your spiritual awakening. As you began to explore spirituality, you learned why you've had many hardships in your life. You received insights into who you really are. You became aware of your spiritual team and so much more. Please share some of the important spiritual insights you learned about yourself, which, by the way, between you and me, is one of the reasons I encourage people to heal, because as you go on your healing journey, you find out all these amazing things about yourself that you had no clue, and they're so helpful.
Yeah. So when all of this started happening, I had one soul, one purpose, and that was to find Bryan, right? That was everything is about finding Bryan. And so that was why, I kept keeping on, right? What I found, and it took me many years, quite honestly, before I was able to look back and see all of the great rewards in my journey. And I think that's a really tough conversation for anybody who's newly grieving, because they can't even begin to see that there are gifts in the journey, right? I don't even like to talk about that with people that are newly grieving, but looking back, I could see not only did I find Bryan, I found my God. I found what God means to me. It wasn't the God I grew up with, right? Who was scary and punishing, and but it was my kind, loving, all that is God that I formed a relationship with.
Right.
And perhaps most importantly, or as equally important, is I found myself, and I found out who I am at my true nature, right? I'm a healer. I'm a teacher. I've always wanted to teach, and I don't know why I didn't. I just wasn't walking my path. And one of the some of the work I do is about birth path and numerology, and how empowering that is for us to know that, because we can learn through understanding the numbers surrounded with our birth path and our time and date of entry into this life, the core gifts that we brought with us to help us navigate through, and there's so much about that, right? Soul
That's
planning and
fascinating. I think that's fabulous. I
oh,
mean,
it's
and
so
people can get a
fascinating.
hold of you and you can give them that information. You can find that information for them. That is
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
That's great. Wow. And what else? Anything else that you want to share that you learned?
Yeah, I mean, just understood. So, you know, one of the things that I understood early on that I consider a spiritual gift was the importance of letting go of my pain and understanding that letting go of my pain wasn't letting go of Bryan. So I was so afraid to let go of the pain. I refused. I held on to it like a like a vice grip. I don't know, with a vice grip, right? Like I'm not going to let go of my pain because if I let go of my pain, I would be betraying him. I would be forgetting about him. I would be moving on, right?
Right.
And it took me a while. And actually, the late Sally Baldwin, who taught me that letting go of the pain has nothing to. It's not letting go of them. In fact, it strengthens our connection with them, because I'm also a healer, and if we have a clear channel, right? If our chakras are balanced and clear, and we're not holding on to this pain that's going to have blockage in us, then spirit can move through us more freely, which is going to enhance the connection that we have. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, I've done some very similar healing and I've had the same experience. So Brian's given you many signs to let you know he's still with you. And I am in awe because he now communicates with you openly, regularly, and clearly. Tell us all about that.
Well, you know what? He is that kid. He just doesn't give up. He never gave up on me. And I am so eternally grateful to him. So glad that we're soulmates, because we are. And he just wasn't going to give up on me, because I can be a little thick-headed. He knew it was going to take a while for me to get it, right? So in the beginning, it was, as most people experience, it was electronics. iPod, back in the day of iPods, starting and stopping by themselves, the TV freezing and restarting, you know, things like that, lights flickering. So that's kind of the fun stuff. And then one day, can I jump ahead to the ladybug story?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so then one day I was outside and I was working in my flowers and I felt a presence. And this was like about 9 months after he'd passed. And so I'd already started my psychic awareness, my psychic development work. I'd been going to courses and things. And I'm like, wait, who's here? You know, Mom, is that you? Because my mom died in 2002. And I get no response. I don't feel anything. And then I'm like, well, Bryan, is it you? And again, no reaction. So I was like, well, Mom, if it's you, send me a yellow butterfly. Bryan, if it's you, send me a ladybug. And forgot all about it. I did have that kind of, again, spirit message. You know what I'm talking about? When you hear without hearing, you know, you just know the thought, right?
Right.
And the voice said, don't worry about this. You have asked and it shall be granted. And I'm
Wow.
like, okay. So that night we're celebrating my birthday. The kids are all coming. I don't know why I was cooking on my birthday. That's another story
Yeah.
for another day. But apparently I was. And I walk back past our bay window and I just happened to look down, and there on the windowsill is a ladybug. And I screamed and I jumped up and down. I mean, seriously, our kids thought I had lost it. I think that I was having a massive panic attack. But we'd lived in the house 10 or 12 years at that time. I'd never seen a ladybug in the house. And that was the first one. And I asked him for that. That's the importance of that story. So you can ask your loved one, you guys, to send you a sign and wait for it and be patient, and it shall be granted to
And
you.
that's amazing. And then I wanted to ask you also about the alternative modalities you've used to heal, to help you with your grief. And I am so familiar with those grief surges, as you call them.
Yeah, I kind of coined that phrase grief surges because that's what it felt like to me. It's like it was just this sudden onslaught of like a surge, right? Like this whoosh of grief that would hit me. You know, you expect them right around birthdays, anniversaries, you know, things like that, that you know are going to trigger a memory. But it's so you can prepare for those, but it's the random ones that hit out of nowhere for no
They
apparent
ambush
reason.
you.
Huh?
They ambush you.
They ambush you, and it's like this surge of grief and you can't stop it. It's just like buckle down and, you know, go to your knees and allow it is really the best thing to do, is to allow it to feel that moment and let it pass through you. But in order to learn how to deal with both the planned and, the ones I could expect and the ones I couldn't expect, I learned energy healing. I can't say enough about Reiki and pranic healing, are the two modalities that I learned, that I practice, that I have practiced for a number of years. Hiking and walking were my solace. I'm very blessed. I live in Boise. We're surrounded by foothills here, and there's many, many, many trails. And I just go out there and I love the feel of my feet hitting the dirt, and I walk and I talk to Bryan and I talk to God, and I am filled with such peace. There's a story in the book about one time, really pretty recently in the last few years, where Bryan literally carried me down the mountain. And I'm telling you, that's a true story. I don't know how I ran down that mountain as fast as I did I wouldn't have without his help. So these are the ways, meditation, a lot of people say, what's the number one thing? What's the number one tool that helped you through? And it has to be meditation. And people are scared of meditation. They're like, I can't meditate, or I don't know how, but just don't make it complicated. It's easy. It takes time to be able to get to the point where you can meditate without crying, because I understand that. I was there. But once you get past that point, it can be 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour. So meditation is really important to keep yourself open, because we have to be open to receive the signs. Right.
Right.
We can't be closed up and receive the signs. But the reason, Bryan just never quit. He just kept sending them and sending them and sending them. And he still does.
He's my kind of guy.
Yeah.
So through all these modalities, is this how you enhanced your intuition, or was there anything that was special that you did to also enhance your intuition?
Yeah, definitely meditation and the energy work. And I tell people, go explore some energy, some understanding. We need to understand our own energy and how our energy works. We need to understand, life force energy and how it runs through us, that we have different energy bodies, right? Trauma and drama has to kind of work through our energy bodies before it can even make its way to our physical body. So we want to keep everything clean and cleansed and balanced as much as we can to protect our physical body and to protect our, astral, mental, emotional, all of the bodies. So it's really important to have an understanding of that. One of the fun ways to do that is to just go outside and look at the trunk of a tree and just loosely, very loosely set your gaze on that tree it's kind of like you're looking, but not looking. And then you'll see the life energy of the tree. And it's the most powerful thing. Like that's when
so cool. I think everyone should try to do that. Spring is coming over here in the Northeast.
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yeah. But yeah, so, and meditation and energy healing for me. And I did take psychic development classes. I took angels and guide workshops because I wanted to know what all that meant. I'm like, guides? What do you mean guides? Angels? And so I did it all. If it was put in front of me to learn, I learned it.
So you did all this and you experienced all these spiritual seekers and all that, but you also learned about discernment. Tell us about that.
So it is so important to seek, right? You want to be a seeker, but be careful, you guys, don't do what I did. So I was so desperate for information. Again, this was in the first 2 years of Bryan's passing. And I was so desperate for more information about where he is and what's my life purpose and, And I reached out online to this woman in Hawaii. I don't recall her name. And she was doing, readings online. And it was more of a life purpose reading, I believe. And so I just signed up and I paid for it. I don't know this woman. She wasn't referred to me by anybody. And what I got back was a written reading, and it was devastating. It was, she told me I wasn't of the light. My work wasn't of the light, because I've been doing this work on and off for a long time. And I mean, I just was floored. I was devastated that, how could I not?
Did you want money to help you with this?
What's that?
Did she want more money to help you with this?
Yeah, well, somebody else said that, and I bet you she would have, but I never even got back to her. I immediately called my psychic that I had seen every month for the first year after Bryan died, and he does not do this outside of paid session times, but he did to me. He thankfully wrote me back pages of explanation and how I could have used discernment and how none of it was true and why none of it was true. And then I have another psychic friend here in the area who also came to my side that day. And between the two of them, they, got me calmed down. But I was devastated. It rocked me. It really did, because everything I had been learning, I believed was of God. And everything I do is of God and of God's light. Every time I do a meditation for people, I'm always like, only those of God's love and light may enter this space today. So not only was that experience important for discernment, but also for protection. Like there's ways energetically that we can protect ourselves from people and spirit, right? Who may not have our best interests at heart.
Right. And it's important to know. And I tell people, like in every profession, be it an artist or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, there are people who are disingenuous. There are people who are not, are not operating at the highest good, to your highest good or whatever. And it's important to, it makes me angry because it gives this world a black eye. But
Well,
there's people in all professions that are not on the up and up. So
it does that, but especially in this arena, though, because, as grievers, we're so vulnerable. We're probably the most vulnerable audience that there is. And we all want information, and we all want validation. We all want to talk to our kids or our husbands or,
right.
And how dare they, right? How dare they take advantage?
Exactly.
I was quite angry. I'll be nice. I was quite angry after I got over my fear of the devil was going to grab me any moment and claim me.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. Wow. And you then, on the other end of this, you had an extraordinary out-of-body experience during a meditation in 2018.
Was it 2018? I must be. It seems like it was longer ago. But yes, I was at the Helping Parents Heal conference in Phoenix. And Dr. Mark Pitstick, I think, was running a guided meditation in a workshop there. And here's what I think. I think that this was an out-of-body experience. And the reason that I think that is I believe that spirit planned for me to have this experience that day. I'm a good meditator, but I haven't had a lot of that kind of real concrete, experiences. And this time I immediately went under kind of in the meditation. This was a room that probably had 100 people in the room. This was not a small gathering.
Right.
And we were all in, uncomfortable folded chairs. I was with my core group of Sun Valley moms, we call ourselves. And I just immediately went under, and I'm following the instructions, and, we're walking through the meadow and over the bridge and through the door. And all of a sudden I came to a garden, and in this garden, it was the most, people say that if they have an afterlife, after death experience, and they get to the other side and they can't believe the colors. I'm here to tell you that is true. The colors were so vibrant and so amazing. I can feel my mom's energy as I tell you that right now, because my mom loved flowers, which is where I have my love of them, where I got that. And I can hear her just saying, yes, yes, you can't describe how beautiful it is. And then I saw the ladybugs. The ladybugs were on the flowers, and the ladybugs, then there were bigger ladybugs flying around in this garden. And then I saw my loved ones coming toward me. And first I saw Bryan, and then I saw my dad and my mom and my grandparents and all the people, not all that, there are many people here I hold dear that I love. But all my people are there, right? All my immediate family people, other than my siblings, are all there. And they came to me, Irene, and they wrapped me up like a group hug, like a big group hug. And they started sending their love to me. And so on one hand, on the left side of my brain, I saw myself in the chair in the conference room, and tears are streaming down my face. The right side of my brain, I'm there, and I'm in this meadow, and my loved ones are giving me this hug. And I'm aware that in my physical body in the chair, my stomach was starting to hurt because the love was so powerful. It was honestly just too much for my body to take. And right when I was, they just kept pouring and pouring. And right when I was like, I can't take it anymore because of the pain in the physical part of me, they pulled back. And then Bryan grabbed my hand, and he said, come with me. And he took me flying. and we're flying around. And I didn't know it at first, but what I wrote down immediately afterward was the sky was the ground and the ground was the sky. And then of course that meant, we were flying, and I saw spirit everywhere. Little dots of white light spirit were all over the place. They were flying too. And I was just flying with Bryan, holding his hand. And then he stopped and he looked at me and he said, remember the movement. Remember the movement. This is why I don't want to come back. There's power in the movement. And so a lot of people have different interpretations for what that means, right? That message. All I know is it was the most beautiful. To me, it was acceptance of the fact that he is not only happy where he is, this is his choice to be there. He wants to be there. He doesn't want to return to this body. I know for a fact that Bryan and I are working together, that he brings people to me that I work with, just like, Saul, right? Saul brings people to you. And so anyhow, he brought me that message. And then one more time, I had all of my loved ones, and it was kind of like Bryan just kind of like, pulling back, right? Then they just pulled back their energy. And then I was fully back in the chair again, still just sobbing. And immediately when I finally kind of came out of it, I wrote it all down. So the chapter of the book that tells that story is verbatim, word for word, as I experienced it immediately after it happened.
What a blessed experience.
I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful.
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful experience. So now I have to ask you, what is conscious suffering? And why must a person say yes to suffering before he or she can transcend it?
I ran across a quote by Eckhart Tolle once in his book, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. And the quote is, the fire of suffering becomes the light of consciousness. The ego says, I shouldn't have to suffer. I shouldn't have to suffer. And that thought makes us suffer so much more, right? It's a distortion of the truth, which is always paradoxical. The truth is that you need to say yes to suffering before you can transcend it. You need to say yes to suffering before you can transcend it. And
it's
so
that's like an acceptance of it. It's an acceptance of it before you can figure out how to move through.
You have to say yes to it so you can fully feel it too, right? So no feel, no heal, right? So you have to fully feel it, and then we have to let it go. If we want to expand, and if we want to kind of grow our awareness around this spiritual journey that we're on, this ride that we're on, that we didn't ask to be on, well, okay, that's another topic. Yeah. But, that's another conversation. But so you must say yes to suffering. And to me, when I say yes to suffering, that is conscious suffering. That is, I'm consciously choosing to feel the pain so that I can release the pain so that I can heal.
Yeah, this is all about living consciously, being aware, being in touch. So there are so many helpful grief support groups. Why did you choose Helping Parents Heal? And tell us what you do in your role of a caring listener and an affiliate leader for Helping Parents Heal.
Well, thank you for asking that. So when Bryan died, there were not very many resources out there. There was a well, I won't name, but there was one grief support group here locally. And I just knew intuitively that I had no interest in that whatsoever. They kept, like sending me things in the mail. And I'm just like, I have no interest in going to talk to people who are just going to sit around and cry. I knew that that wasn't my path. And then I found out about Helping Parents Heal, and their philosophy is the same as mine, that we can still connect with our loved ones, still live, that we can connect with them, and that we can continue having a relationship with them. The mom-child relationship can continue. We do that in a non-religious, non-dogmatic way. So we don't discuss religion. Everything is spiritually of God based. So I was an affiliate leader for them. Really, this is just in the first couple of years after Elizabeth and Mark started Helping Parents Heal. And I was an affiliate leader in Boise, Idaho. And I did that for about 1.5 years at my healing center, which I closed. And so then I discontinued being a support group affiliate leader. And then I don't know, about 1 year ago, I signed back up to be a caring listener. A caring listener is somebody who, as a volunteer, people can call us and have a conversation with us about their grief and about how they're feeling and, whatever it is they want to talk about.
I mean, that is such an admirable thing that you do. I mean, people are in pain and they're calling you like that.
There's so many of us now too. I think there's like 30 caring listeners. Wow. So there's a huge, So on the helpingparentsheal.org website, I think it's .org. There's a tab that says caring listeners, and you can go through there and you can scroll through the entire list and pick the person that resonates most with you. It might be somebody whose child was murdered like mine, might be somebody on there who maybe is living with a death by suicide that you might relate to better, whatever it is. Yeah, and that's all at no charge. And then so I do that, and then I also I was running a weekly Zoom to connect with our loved ones meditation series in November and December. And just earlier this month, decided to kind of incorporate that under the Helping Parents Heal umbrella. So I'm now an affiliate leader under what we call a specialty group. It's called Spiritual Tools for Grief Healing. So basically all of the tools that I talk about in the book, but we go into those in a much deeper level. We're currently meeting weekly. I don't know how long we'll do that, but currently we meet every Monday night. We're meeting tonight. And if somebody wanted to join, they could just go to Facebook and search for Helping Parents Heal, Spiritual Tools for Grief Healing. And then they would
That's
find
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
I love working with people like that. I love teaching them the tools, and they're going to, it's like an AA meeting. They're going to take what they need and leave the rest behind. Maybe like I did a big presentation on crystals last week, and, it was amazing. I loved it. The week before that, it was about essential oils. I had another mom presenting about essential oils. These are all tools. Next week, Sarah Rubel with Death Teaches is going to come on and talk to us about soul planning. These are all tools. You pick which ones you want and leave that. I hope you'll be a guest sometime on our, I know you're going to be on the main Helping Parents Heal soon.
It'll be my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
And now for everyone, I need to ask you, what does a Bryan hug feel like?
Oh
my God. And you use prayer and gratitude to help lessen the intensity of grief. Share. Tell us more.
So it's really interesting how my communications with Bryan have progressed, right? And when I first started meditating, I would get that tingling at the crown, right? Which a lot of us do as we're opening up, and as our crown chakra is opening up, we get that kind of tingling. But Bryan used to do that in the car. I would just be driving, and all of a sudden he would like mess with my hair because he knew I didn't like that. He used to always mess with my hair, and he knew I didn't like that. So
like a pesky kid after it doesn't matter.
That was like that. That was the first physical thing that I guess that he did with me. And then, all the signs that we've talked about and more. And then I'm trying to think when it started, actually after that meditation in Phoenix. So that must have opened me up. That's what it was, Irene. I'm just having this aha moment right now. I think that must have somehow opened me up to be able to receive him and the way he comes to me now, which is he just enters my body energetically, and he sends we call it Team Rush now, because it's probably not just Bryan. It's Bryan and some of my spirit team, right? But they send me this hug that like I'm vibrating. I'm physically vibrating. The intensity is so strong. Sometimes if I'm holding, like one time I was holding my phone talking to somebody when it happened, I had to like drop my phone, and they're like, hello. And I'm over here going, whoa. And I've learned to just stop when it happens and let it run through me, because it's such a gift. It is such a gift. And I'll tell you, I know the next step is going to be seeing him. It almost happened a few weeks ago, and it will happen someday. And I'm so excited for that too. I don't know if he'll present in his physical form or his light body form, but I'm willing to see him in whatever way he chooses.
You'll take him however you can get him. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the Bryan hugs are amazing, and they get stronger over time. So it used to be I'd get a little one, it just would be little, and now it's grown to such an intensity that it stops me dead in my tracks. I love it.
I would imagine that's a precursor to what it's really like on the other side when you reunite. It's a vibration thing, and when people come together. And tell me how prayer and gratitude help lessen the intensity of grief for you.
Well, I think it's always true whenever we're in any kind of trauma. I don't mean trauma like, rape or anything like that. But, when we're having a bad day, the best way to get out of ourselves is to do something for other people, right? Or to feel gratitude for the blessings that we have in our life. And I know that sounds like that's old news, right? But it's so important. And I had to include a short chapter of that in my book, because it is so powerful and it is so important every day. And I would say, even if you can only be grateful for the fact that you opened your eyes today, then be grateful for that, right? And then I try to find 3 things that you can be grateful for every day. And you'll be amazed at how many things you are grateful for in your life. For me, nature is so huge, such a huge part of my healing. So get outside, be grateful for the sky, be grateful for the birds that are starting to chirp and sing again. Yay, winter's just about over, at least in Idaho. You know what I mean? Like, be grateful for all of these gifts. Be grateful for your child or your husband or your
Absolutely.
sibling or your grandparent that's in spirit. Be grateful for the fact that they're right beside you and that they're trying to communicate with you, and that you can still have that relationship with them, right?
Oh my goodness.
So
Yeah.
prayer to me is almost simultaneous. It's almost like the same thing as meditation. I always pray when I meditate. So I was never a church goer, so I don't do prayer in that traditional sense. But I understand it and I don't have any problem with it. I think everybody does it their own way. And I think whatever it is for you that works, whatever it is, if it's prayer, meditation, whatever word you use for God, it's just like, find what works for you. That's what I tell people, is find what works for you. What worked for me may not be what worked for you, but if you keep looking, if you keep seeking, you will find what works for you. And
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it will 1,000 times enhance your healing. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So this leads me to Paige. Why is it important to choose to believe?
Oh,
Which
I
is the
love that.
title of your book, and it is
Yeah.
so important.
So on this whole journey, and it's been 12 and a half years for me now, it's been a day, it's been a day or two. And even though, so I talked about that 1 foot on the spiritual lane of the highway, right? And I'm learning all this stuff and Bryan's sending all these amazing signs. And then there's that grief. And with the grief was that voice saying, oh, baloney. That's not Bryan, or, that couldn't be real. And you're not
Right.
hearing anything. And so I doubted, and then I'd believe, and I didn't understand fully what it meant to embrace these new belief systems that I was learning about. And then one day in meditation, I'd been having a particularly difficult time. And Spirit said, listen, it's like, listen, Linda, just choose to believe and then you will. It's that simple. Quit making it so hard. And I'm like, really? Like, I can just choose to believe? Like I can choose to get out of bed every day. I can choose to be happy today, or I can choose to be sad today. I can choose to believe that it's all real. And so I did. I just did. And it was no time at all
It made all the
before,
difference.
yeah, before there was no difference anymore.
Right.
So I knew always that would be the title of my book after Spirit told me that. It took me many years to write the book after that, but I always knew that would be the title of it, because that's all we have to do is choose.
I love
Choose
that.
to believe.
I love that. I myself have had an experience where people have told me, I don't know, how can you believe this? And I don't buy it. And I'll say to them, listen, you could choose not to believe. I tell this to people, and if you want to think it's over when it's over and that's all there is, go for it. But I choose to know there's more, and I like my angle on the dangle a lot better. Thank you very much.
I agree. And, for some people that is enough, right? For some people, it's enough to just know they're in heaven. I'll see them again someday. And that's fine. I was telling a mom just yesterday, I'm like, but for me, that was not enough. I was not going to ever settle for that or be happy with that, because it wasn't enough. So,
Right. And
you
you
know,
receive proof of otherwise, which is so important.
yeah.
You have a mom child reunion coming up this fall in McCall, Idaho. You want to tell us about that?
Oh, I'm so excited. I don't quite have it ready to announce yet. So in 2010, I was very blessed to be one of only 7 moms who went to Sun Valley with the late Sally Baldwin, who's a very kind of world-renowned channel and medium. And this was her kind of volunteer work. She only got 3 years in before she passed, but she, would channel and handpick out of 100 or more applicants to come to this 3.5-day retreat at the time in Sun Valley, Idaho, which for me was, a 3.5-hour drive. So she always said, Bryan wouldn't leave me alone. I had to pick you. Bryan kept bugging me. So anyhow, and then sadly, when she passed, in 2000, after she did the retreat in 2011, I think she passed later that year, or maybe in 2012 at the latest. I always knew that I wanted to do that. I wanted to offer that to other people, because what we were given and gifted those 3.5 days was everything. Completely changed the trajectory of my healing. Right. I was introduced to Reiki there. They introduced us to animal spirit guides, the grief recovery method, which I include components of that in my teaching because I'm certified in that as well. And then of course, channeling and mediumship. And like I said, the concept of letting go of the pain. There's so much that we learned and that we bonded together as a group. And it was so critical to my journey that I've always wanted to do that for other people. So finally, it is happening this year. I want to be conscious of COVID. I'm hoping by October, it's October 3rd through the 8th. We are doubling the numbers. So instead of 7, we're going to have 17, a little more than double the number of participants. We keep it small because you can't have that kind of group experience. Right.
It's a very intimate, it's emotional.
But we'll have a medium there, even though myself and a lot of my presenters have intuition and mediumship skills. I really wanted somebody who that's what they do for a living. That's who they are. So we have that person. Jill Renee Feeler is coming. She'll be there the entire weekend with us doing readings and channeling. I will be doing Reiki sessions. My friend Lynn, fellow Sun Valley mom from England, is coming all the way over, and she'll be teaching channeling, which is how Sally taught us to communicate. It's going to be amazing. I don't want to give it all away.
You know what, though? I'm going to encourage people because we're going to find out how the best ways for people to connect with you. Yeah. So you may have to plan a few of them because I'm sure people are going to reach out to you about that.
I would like to take them on the road. Actually, it'd be fun to take it into different communities.
I think it's wonderful.
I don't mean to make it sound cheap, but wouldn't it be great to just do these small grief workshops? That's my dream. That's my ultimate dream. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. So I want to ask you how spiritual growth is a pathway to healing, which I totally believe in also. And what is your message about the importance of healing grief that you'd like to share with our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience?
For me, the spiritual journey was the only pathway to healing, right? I would not have healed. I almost chose not to heal, right? I almost took a different path, but I knew intuitively that wasn't that wasn't my truth. That wasn't going to be my path. And so I just kept putting one foot forward in front of the other, receiving the signs and receiving the messages and doing what I thought was my part, right? To keep moving forward. I had to, because if I didn't find Bryan in the afterlife, I simply was not going to, I wouldn't be here today. That's just the bottom line. I absolutely, without a doubt, would not be here today.
Made all the difference.
Yeah. And so for me, it was the only way. There was never going to be any other way. And I know now, after all of the studying and the work and the things that I've learned, that Bryan and I did plan this. And again, soul planning, a whole nother conversation, but we did plan it. We did choose that this was a possibility, that we would, in our humanness and with our ability to choose once we're here, that this is something that might transpire. And then he did, he chose to exit when he did. And so who am I to say no to that, right? I have to honor that. I have to honor that he chose to put this into motion. So I have to do my part. That's how I look at it. And I know he guides me. I know he brings kids to me. I know that he sets us up with parents. He, spirit as a whole makes these connections for us and leads us to one another, to other people like you, Irene, soul sisters on the journey.
Absolutely. We're passing it forward all the time.
And when you meet somebody who you're connected with in that way, right? So for me, there was no other way. And what was the second part of your
The
question? I'm
part was,
sorry.
why should a person choose to heal grief? Why should they choose to heal their grief?
Oh my gosh, why would you not? I
I
guess
mean,
is
like, they've got a choice. They can stay and suffer, and
yeah,
some
you
people
can.
really like staying in that spot. And
Yeah.
I'm proposing to them, give it a listen, and you have a choice. You can choose to heal your grief. It can be healed.
You know, it's some people honestly just want to stay stuck in their story. And I always say, you are bigger than your story. You are so much bigger than your story of pain. Don't belittle yourself and your contract that you made with your loved one and don't belittle all of that to stay stuck in your pain. You are so much bigger than that. You are so beautiful, shining light, shining soul, right? That you have much to offer the world. And that's why I kind of bring the numerology stuff into one of my reading types, because it empowers us to get out of that space and to want to step forward and think, okay, well, how can I be happy? How can I be joyful? How can I make a contribution to the world? What gifts do I have that perhaps I can use as therapy in my own healing? And then I can turn around and share it with other people, because that is why we're here. We're here to share with each other. We're here to help each other heal. Now you can choose. I tried the wine bottle. Let me tell you, you can choose to stay in the wine bottle. You can choose drugs. You can choose to stay in bed forever. That's your choice. We have free will. I'm just here to tell you, and Irene is here to tell you, that you can heal from your pain and you can still have a relationship with your loved one. It
Absolutely.
does, but it takes work. It does take work. I'm not going to lie.
Right. So I want to hear about your grief healing sessions and your private intuitive sessions, and the best ways for people to connect with you about all of this.
Oh,
Let her rip. Let her go. Paige, how
yes.
do they find you?
You're so generous. I just love it. Thank you. Thank you again. So I have a website. It's paigewlee.com.
It's
P-A-I.
Paige.
Yes, thank you. WLEE.com. On Facebook, I'm Paige Lee. My business page on Facebook is Paige W. Lee. On Instagram, I'm Paige W. Lee author. And that's it. I don't Twitter. I don't know how to do all that. So those are the best ways to reach me. My email, just go to my website and there's a contact form.
And
So
your website is what again?
pagewlee.com.
Okay.
And I have a variety of offerings. The intuitive grief session, which is the one that I've talked about today, is probably my favorite session. It's my most popular session by far. It's $140. It includes a love letter from heaven, which is
Oh,
a channeled letter from your loved one to you that I channel prior to the session. And it's super empowering with all of the numerological influences that affect you and how you can use that information to move forward in your healing. I also, as an intuitive, I do intuitive readings. I'm just getting ready soon to launch a kind of a soul circle type small group format. We'll meet weekly and go over a lot of guided meditation and tools on a deeper level to help
cool.
us move forward, because that's all about opening people up to their own intuition, understanding how their own energy works. How can they feel it? How can they sense it? How can they, manipulate energy? How can they protect themselves? All of that. So that'll be a small group format coming soon. And then I will offer actual grief healing on a not in person, but a virtual basis. I'll be offering those again too, bringing in my healing that I miss so much. So that'll be really powerful to helping people clear any blocks that they have.
That's wonderful. And you, of all people, what is your tip for finding joy in life?
Well, for finding joy in life is belief. So finding joy as a griever, right? That's a big question. But finding joy as a griever is 1,000% believing in the afterlife and believing that my son still lives. Hands down, no doubt about that. If I take myself out of that kind of grieving suit, right, and put myself as just a person, for me, joy is nature. For me, joy is the trees and the birds and the flowers and the mountains and, all of the ocean, and particularly the mountains, and living in Idaho. So yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Wow, that's great. Well, Paige, I have to truly say that your book, Choose to Believe, A Story of Miracles, Healing, and the Afterlife, is spellbinding.
Oh,
And it's a wonderful read from start to finish. and even more spellbinding is how you chose to find Bryan and move through your devastating grief to healing, which has filled your life with inspiring new meaning. I have absolutely no doubt that your insightful, riveting book will inspire many in our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience to choose to believe and choose to heal, as will this remarkable interview. Thank you from my heart. And here's a reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us, because we know you do, on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. As I
Thank you.
like to, oh, you're welcome. Go
I
ahead.
just
Go
wanted
ahead.
to say thank you. I'm just like, I didn't say it when you had that little pause back there, but thank you so much. And for your listeners, thank you for listening. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to spread the word, because it's all about spreading the word and
It's
spreading
all
the
about
love.
it. Oh,
So
you're wonderful. Thank you so much. As I like to say, and I think this really applies to you and me, Paige, as I like to say, to be continued. Many blessings, and bye for now.